In one of the well-known institutions, someone attempts to escape, and an elderly man named Dr. Kim Hee-won tries to stop one of the armed men blocking his path and shouting urgently for Kim Hyun-sung to leave quickly and run. Hyun-sung tries to run, but his conscience torments him, and he feels regret and sorrow for leaving Dr. Kim Hee-won behind like this. Until the sound of a gunshot echoes through the place, hitting Dr. Kim Hee-won and leaving him seriously injured. Hyun-sung rushes back, shouting apologies, raising his voice so Hee-won can hear his apology. Armed, masked men stand at the gate, preventing anyone from entering. There is also a support team reporting that the Tango group is at the bottom of the third-floor stairs, while another team reports they are ready to storm the fourth floor of the research building. Indeed, the storming begins immediately. From the outside, the support team manages to enter, surprising the armed men who try to take cover. They then establish a fire barrier to hinder the support team's advance. However, the support team is trained for such situations and takes up strategic positions to expose enemy locations and strike them. Meanwhile, urgent news broadcasts on all channels about a violent terrorist attack inside the Defense Development Agency. Fortunately, reports indicate that most terrorists have been subdued. It is said that the terrorist's target is the KF-21 Block II fighter jet and the Hyunmoo-V strategic ballistic missile, which contain the design and material technology of Korea's most advanced weapons. An attempt to steal the extra data chip was revealed. During that time, Hyun hides in an isolated place, trembling as he tries not to make any sound that would reveal his presence. His heart nearly stops from fear when he hears the traitor, Lee Ho-hyung, calling out to him, telling him that he knows he's hiding there and that it would be best for him to hand over the chip now. He continues searching and says that if it weren't for Hyun-sung, he would have escaped long ago. He tries to change his tone to be more calming, telling Hyun-sung that if he hands over the chip now, he won't kill him. He adds that if Hyun keeps quiet and says nothing to anyone, he will receive a great reward. Hyun-sung remains silent, knowing that Hyung's words are nonsense because the value of the chip exceeds that of his own life. Hyun-sung continues trembling in fear, knowing that the result will be his death. So he quickly swallows the chip. At that moment, Ho-hyung finds him and tells him it's impossible that he swallowed the chip. Ho-hyung becomes enraged, furious at the situation, knowing he won't be able to obtain the chip easily now. He fires at Hyun intensely, giving him no chance of survival. Then he starts kicking his corpse in a fit of rage, asking why he did it, why things had to come to this point, and why the chip wasn't worth his life. He adds that Hyun could have pretended not to know if asked and didn't need to push things this far. Hyun, while dying, tries to speak, telling Ho-hyung that a traitor like him should have died. This provokes Ho-hyung, seeing Hyun-sung's persistence even in his dying state. At that moment, the support team finally enters, ordering Ho-hyung to stay still and not resist, or they will shoot immediately. But Ho-hyung insists on fleeing and tries to escape. The moment he moves, a barrage of bullets hits him. Hyun, in his final moments, witnesses Ho-hyung's death, grateful that the chip remained unharmed and didn't fall into the terrorist's hands. Then he closes his eyes, accepting his fate. In the news, it is reported that during the autopsy of director Kim Hyun-sung, who was killed during the terrorist attack on the Defense Development Agency, an extra data chip was found in his stomach. The government decided to honor Hyun-sung by awarding him the National Security Merit Medal for his sacrifice to protect the chip. Elsewhere, Hyun-sung starts to question his surroundings and what has happened, wondering if he has died or not. He then realizes that if he were truly dead, he wouldn't be pondering his death. As he opens his eyes, he sees a woman he doesn't recognize, wondering if this is the moment when his life flashes before his eyes. But he also realizes that he has never seen this woman before. Suddenly, without any warning, the woman slaps him across the face and demands that he pull himself together. Hyun-sung is in pain and confused about what has happened, and the woman asks if he has regained his senses. Hyun-sung tells her that he doesn't remember anything that happened. She informs him that it's probably because he hit his head before losing consciousness. Hyun-sung tries to recall and finds himself in a bar, but he still cannot recognize the woman. All that comes to mind is that this must be his life flashing before his eyes, showing parts of his past he never even remembered. He is amazed at the vivid details of the moment. The woman shouts at the men who hit Hyun-sung, calling them crazy for beating someone so violently. The two men respond, asking her to take a look at their condition and telling her that Hyun-sung was the one who attacked them first. She looks at them and finds that they are indeed in a bad state just like Hyun-sung. She starts feeling embarrassed and nervous about the awkward situation. Trying to resolve it, she tells them that it's enough and there's no need to complicate things further. But the two men insist on getting their due from Hyun-sung. She takes out a large amount of money for each of them and tells them that this is a small compensation and they should end the matter now. The men accept the compensation and stop fighting and yelling, and she wishes them well, asking them to be careful on their way home. She then turns to Hyun, pulling him up and telling him she will take him to the hospital first, as his head injury needs to be examined. Hyun nervously asks her if they have known each other before and wants to know who she is. Her expression changes, showing shock, and Hyun-sung feels extreme anxiety and guilt for something beyond his control. She calls Secretary Yang and asks him to come to them immediately. Hyun-sung thinks that she is addressing him as the director and president, something no one had ever seriously called him before. Moments later, a heavily built man, Secretary Yang, arrives. He tells Hyun-sung that he will be accompanying him from now on. Hyun-sung is stunned by his size and wishes to understand what exactly is happening. Secretary Yang lifts Hyun effortlessly, and it is apparent to anyone the difference in size between them and just how strong and massive Secretary Yang is. Upon leaving the bar, Secretary Yang sets him down and informs him that they are heading to Daewoo General Hospital. All Hyun-sung can think about is how long this flashback of his life is. As he looks at the car he is about to get into, he notices it is a very old Mercedes. He wonders what year this model was released. Trying to recollect his memories a bit, he realizes that he had never driven such a car before and that he always dreamed of it, but due to his financial capabilities he could never afford it. He looks at them and tells them that this isn't his car, not noticing his reflection in the car window. However, he does notice it a moment later and turns his head to confirm what he saw. Secretary Yang tells him that indeed this isn't his car and that Miss Jael is very kind, but all Hyun-sung can focus on are the features of the person reflected in the car window. The body, the face, and this appearance all belong to Jin Hyun-sung, yet he doesn't understand why he has Jin Hyun-sung's face now. He remembers that when he was studying in America, he couldn't attend his funeral due to visa issues, and all he knew was that Hyun had died during a brawl in a bar. Hyun-sung's birthday coincides with Hun's death anniversary, so he asks the secretary if today is January 5th. She confirms that it is, asking if he has started to regain his senses a little. Hyun-sung looks out the window and finds himself in front of a statue depicting a famous scene of Marilyn Monroe with her dress. Hyun-sung stares at it for a long time, trying to grasp the era he is in, and looks at the street displays, the signs, the store banners, and everything around him, realizing that he has likely gone back in time to 1998. He has ended up in the body of someone who died young. At the hospital, the doctor informs them that the MRI scan shows no serious injuries and there is nothing to worry about. The secretary tells him it would be best if he stays in the hospital for a day, but Hyun-sung insists on going home as he needs a quiet place to collect his thoughts. They hear someone shouting angrily from outside, "What is this nonsense they are doing?" Hyun is surprised to see the person who enters, who turns out to be Hyun-sung's father, the head of Daewoo Group. Jin tells Hyun-sung, who is now in his son's body, "Look at yourself and see your pathetic state." Hyun is stunned by this harsh treatment. Chairman Jin addresses the secretary, asking her to tell him exactly what happened. She replies that fortunately, there is no major threat to his brain. Jin gets angry and tells her he asked what happened, so she must tell him exactly what occurred. Secretary Kim apologizes to him and tells him that they compensated the other party, so there shouldn't be any issues or problems. The chairman says that nothing must leak to the press under any circumstances, and if rumors spread again, she will bear the consequences. Chairman Jin leaves, slamming the door shut in anger. Secretary Kim tells Hyun-sung not to take it to heart and that there's no need to stress himself. But when she turns to him, she notices he is unusually calm and unaffected by what happened, unlike his usual self. Hyun-sung sighed, understanding why Jin Hyun-sung was always rebellious and irritable, now realizing why he refused to talk about his family and hated everything related to them. Hyun-sung puts on his jacket and asks Secretary Kim to leave now, as he wants to rest at home. After Hyun-sung returns to his luxurious home, he starts changing clothes, saying that he is finally in a quiet place where he can think clearly and grasp the situation he is in. He looks in the mirror and begins to contemplate his reflection, finding that these are indeed Hyun's features in the same year that he died. He wonders what his real body is doing right now. As he removes the watch, he is surprised by what he finds on his wrist. Thinking it might be a tattoo or something else, its appearance is strange, almost like an electronic chip. Suddenly, a system window appears before him, looking extremely outdated. Hyun-sung is taken aback and remains in disbelief at what he sees, realizing that it is a password entry screen, but an extremely old version, specifically Ho Hyun's quantum encryption interface. This makes him think it can only mean one thing. He tells the system, Director of Extra Research Kim Hyun-sung ID, Kim Hyun-sung 001 password, K238EA4DLS. As soon as he says that, it logs him in, displaying numerous files. This confirms Hyun-sung's suspicion. All of these are research files related to advanced weapons designed until 2024, with all schematic data saved on the extra data chip. Even the processes for manufacturing the essential materials are there, which isn't just good luck but more akin to hitting the jackpot. In his previous life, Japan held patents for most of the materials, making their development nearly impossible. But now, in 1998, most materials have yet to be patented. Hyun-sung laughs slightly, saying that he will be the one to develop them first and will create a minefield of patents himself. He resolves to work on creating advanced weapons technology beyond what can be imagined in this era. Moreover, he is the son of one of the arms industry's moguls, which means he could control the industry globally. But suddenly Hyun feels his head spinning and dizzy, thinking that this might be a punishment for his selfish thoughts. He says he won't think this way again and will live virtuously. But suddenly his head starts glowing again, and he sees flashes of old memories throughout his life. However, they are not his memories, they are Jin Hyun-sung's memories. Hyun feels exhausted, lying down on the floor due to the pain in his head, and dreams of the day Kim started working as his secretary. After this, Hyun-sung opens his eyes again, finding himself in the same room, but the morning light has come. He says he was exhausted yesterday because he was reincarnated into someone else's body, and these memories are being forcibly planted into his head. He learns that Hun was merely an illegitimate son and says that he used to think he was just a spoiled businessman. But it turns out there was a reason behind his turmoil and sharp temper, though he also caused a lot of problems, which led to his popularity declining and being demoted to a secondary subsidiary. Hyun ended up being just an assistant manager in one of Geo Group's subsidiaries, which only produced CCTV circuits, far from his rosy dreams of world domination and monopolizing the arms industry. He is now on the brink of getting fired due to Jin Hyun-sung's actions before Hyun-sung entered his body. He decides to try fixing the mistakes of the past, first looking at his phone and considering apologizing personally to ease the tension a bit. Deciding that it's best to call Secretary Kim to arrange a meeting first. When he thinks of Secretary Kim, he remembers how concerned she was for him yesterday and how kind and beautiful she was, treating him with great courtesy. At one of Jaewoo Group's companies, one of the secretaries tells Chairman Jin that his schedule is very busy today, making it extremely difficult to meet. Hyun responds that he completely understands. He knows that this talk about the schedule is just an excuse, an empty pretext, and that they want him to leave and never come back. But if this tension continues as it is, it will only make matters worse and further complicate the issue. So, he politely tells them that he would like to wait for the chairman to arrive, that he only needs 1 minute to meet with him and that he can wait quietly in his office without disturbing anyone. Hearing this, the secretaries can hardly believe their ears or eyes, wondering if this is Hyun. They go to talk amongst themselves about the change in Vice President Hyun's demeanor, marveling at how he now speaks kindly and even laughs. Hyun thinks that the world remains a harsh place where appearances govern everything and that if he had done this with his previous facial features, he would never have gotten in. He starts thinking about how to solve this crisis and smooth things over with Chairman Jin, especially since Jin did not care that his son was injured in a brawl, and his only concern was that the incident not be leaked to the press. Hyun thinks that if only he could gain recognition for his business acumen as a suitable heir to a wealthy family. But his thoughts are interrupted when he sees a report on the chairman's desk related to firepower. He starts reading the report, which refers to improving the performance of 12 caliber shells for K1A1 tanks. As he thinks about it, he realizes that this is the same period in which portable bombs were being developed. He finds it strange to try overcoming American enriched uranium with tungsten rounds alone, seeing it as merely a waste of time since Korea did not develop tungsten rounds of this caliber until early 2024, and it took over 30 years to develop pressure-resistant penetrative materials. But Hyun-sung's negative thoughts are interrupted by the memory of the chip in his possession with all the data already recorded and stored on the extra data chip. So, he sits in front of the computer, deciding to take advantage of this hour before Chairman Jin arrives at his office, and begins executing his plan, making the most of the opportunity given to him. After some time, Hyun-sung printed out a set of documents and handed them to the secretary, who apologized to him, saying that she should have addressed him more formally and respectfully since the matter was work-related. Hyun-sung tells her to address him however she prefers. It's fine. At that moment, Chairman Jin arrives at the office, and the secretary welcomes his arrival. Chairman Jin enters his office but is surprised to see his son there. Hyun-sung becomes nervous and tells the chairman that he has been waiting for him for a while and comes here because he wants to talk to him. Chairman Jin scolds him, telling him to act normally, and orders him to follow him. The chairman sits at his desk, lights a cigar, and tells Hyun-sung to speak quickly and get straight to the point. Hyun-sung notices that the chairman doesn't even look at him and is weary of dealing with his troublesome son. Understanding that an apology won't suffice, as his father's expectations of him have long been lost, this look is what Hyun always received from his father, making Hyun feel sorry just seeing it. Hyun-sung bows and apologizes to Chairman Jin for causing trouble yesterday and disrupting his day. Chairman Jin is surprised and asks if Hyun truly feels remorseful and understands the mistake he made. Hyun replies regretfully that he knows very well that his actions were wrong. Chairman Jin gets frustrated, scolding him and asking why he did it if he knew it was wrong. He continues, pointing out that during a time when the country is in chaos due to the IMF crisis, Hyun-sung goes out to brawl in bars. He asks how long he will continue to tarnish his own and his father's reputation like this. He tells Hyun-sung, disappointed, that he no longer needs his apology and that he has already squandered his last chance. He states that his company will be removed from the group's subsidiaries and that he should no longer use Jaewoo Group's name and must act and face things on his own from now on. Hyun-sung thinks that if his company is removed from the group, it means that all connections and relationships will be severed. So he tells Chairman Jean that he will accept any decision he makes, but before that he asks him to read these documents, stating that it is a proposal to develop new shells and that he had an idea for more powerful penetrative devices, which he decided to include in this proposal. Chairman Jean reads the documents and asks Hyun where this idea came from, saying he had read the reports and saw no possibility for further developments beyond what they had achieved. But suddenly he is stunned by the percentage he reads, 20%. Exclaiming to Hyun Sung that this is impossible, that it is impossible for the penetrative power of the projectile to reach 20%. Hyun, in a serious and firm tone, says that if he is given the chance, he will ensure this plan is under construction and implementation within just 3 months. The chairman remains silent for a moment, taking a few puffs from his cigar, and says that a tungsten projectile with 20% greater penetrative power is even stronger than enriched uranium penetration. He asks Hyun Sung if he understands what is written, to which Hyun Sung responds that he understands completely and that this means every moving tank would be a block of tofu. Not only that, but production costs would drop significantly. The chairman asks if Hyun Sung means that he has managed to develop such unconventional materials. Hyun Sung replies that he supposedly knows, mentioning that he earned a doctorate in metallurgical engineering. Hearing this, the chairman tells him that he knows, but only a country like Germany could possess such advanced alloy technology and that Hyun Sung had been traveling around the world under the guise of business trips. Hyun Sung picks up on the information and Chairman Jean asks if he thinks he stole German technology to deceive him. The chairman asks why Hyun Sung can't deny this accusation either. Hyun Sung asks if he thinks he could pull off such an incredible, cunning feat and steal top-secret international technology. Chairman Jean tells him that wasn't his point, but Hyun Sung grows more furious as the chairman's denial only makes it more provocative and infuriating. Hyun tells him that if he has doubts or things he needs to verify, he can go to the Myletus Research Institute, where senior researchers will easily determine if the technology is German or not. The chairman says that would indeed be faster and asks Secretary Choi to come and send a fax to the Myletus Institute with these documents. He tells her to ask Director Myung Sung-un to verify them himself and get back to him once completed. Hyun Sung is shocked when he hears Professor Myung Sung-un's name, and asks Chairman Jean what Professor Sung-un is doing at the Myletus Institute. Chairman Jean tells him what kind of strange question that is, adding that he brought him there 3 years ago. He asks if Hyun Sung is feeling uneasy or confused because his teacher will be the one reviewing his documents. Hyun Sung recalls that Professor Myung Sung-un was both his and Hyun's mentor during their time at KAIST, dedicating his entire life to the university and scientific research until the day he passed away. But now, at this time, he is the director of the Myletus Research Institute. Hyun Sung feels that this isn't the past or reality he remembers and starts feeling the flow of memories again. He remembers what happened between Hyun and the professor, feeling shocked by what he saw, and it becomes clear that Hyun appointed Professor Myung to establish his foothold at Myletus, meaning that history had changed. The phone rings and the caller is Professor Myung. Chairman Jean answers and seems tense while talking to the professor, continuously asking about his conclusions, surprised when the professor tells him that these documents present a new comprehensive approach. The professor tells him he has never seen anything like this before, and Chairman Jean asks who developed something like this but then tries to change the subject, not answering, telling the professor not to just ask questions, and ends the call, telling him that he will talk to him later. After the call ends, the chairman feels slightly disoriented, clearing his throat a little and collecting his words. Hyun Sung asks what the chairman wants and Chairman Jean asks what he means by that. The chairman says he won't play such a trump card and waste it in vain. Surely Hyun Sung wants something in return, and he asks if Hyun's goal is to return to Myletus. Hyun Sung's eyes light up as he hadn't thought about it from this perspective, but now he finds the offer very tempting. The chairman tells him he can make his head of the procurement team, but he shouldn't aim for a higher position, as this offer is generous given his track record, and even this is too much for him. But Hyun Sung replies that he wants the position of head of the development team, which shocks the chairman. He asks if Hyun Sung understands the importance and weight of this role. He asks why Hyun Sung wants to become head of the development team when from his usual perspective, the procurement team would have been better for him, offering greater opportunities for profit and personal gain. Hyun Sung laughs slightly and tells the chairman that if it were just about money, he could sell these documents for a much higher price elsewhere. Even Myletus could pay much more than they could here. The chairman is stunned by Hyun's cunning and cleverness, looking at him with skeptical eyes, seemingly unable to believe that these words are coming from the son he considers a failure. He asks what happened to him so suddenly to cause such a drastic change in his behavior, then asks him to leave, saying that he will discuss the matter with the executives and inform them of the decision they reach later. Hyun Sung agrees, feeling a bit discouraged, understanding that his journey to becoming the head of the development team will be a long one. He asks to be excused, but the sound of a knock on the door interrupts him. It turns out to be the chairman's son. He enters laughing, saying he heard on his way in that Hyun Sung is going back to Myletus. Hyun Sung smiles awkwardly and pretends to say that it's been a long time since they last saw each other, He remembers that this is Jan Hyun Cheol, the executive director of Myletus and his half-brother from a different mother, who sees Hyun as a barrier or thorn in his path. Cheol strikes Hyun Sung on the back violently, saying with feigned joy that this is fortunate since they've recently been struggling to find capable talent. Hyun Sung looks at him with irritation, and Cheol returns the glare with hatred. Hyun Sung knows it is all just empty words. He once again asks the chairman for permission to leave, and the chairman agrees, complimenting his work. The two exchange hostile glances, Cheol knowing just how much Cheol despises Hyun Sung. Hyun Sung laughs as he leaves, feeling that the atmosphere will be quite exciting in the upcoming period. Afterward, he goes to his office, where Secretary Kim hands him a file, saying it's the last one, and tells him that she has just confirmed that Jaewoo Group has risen to the 27th position in the business rankings. Hyun Sung tells her it's not because of Jaewoo Group's growth or anything like that, but rather due to the unprecedented economic crisis that forced other companies to downsize. He tells the secretary she can leave for the day. Hyun Sung thinks that he wanted to get a sense of the business scene before returning to Myletus, but reviewing the group's financials isn't something easy that can be approached like a merchant in the marketplace. Hyun Sung notices that Secretary Kim hasn't left and asks why she hasn't gone yet. She cheerfully says that she can't leave while he's still here working and tells him that he just needs to ask if he needs help and she won't hesitate. Hyun Sung smiles at her and asks for help summarizing the defense branches, telling her that anything related to Jaewoo Corporation's construction or distribution can be set aside for now. Secretary Kim takes out a file and tells him they'll start with Jaewoo Dion. Hyun Sung takes the file, knowing that Jaewoo Dion is one of 3 major defense companies under Jaewoo Group, specializing in developing armored vehicles such as tanks and self-propelled artillery. Chairman Jean has been overseeing it like a watchtower. Secretary Kim hands him the second file, saying the next one is Cosmos Euro. Hyun Sung knows that this company was initially established to maintain fighter aircraft and has gained enough technical expertise to license the production of aircraft engines. In the modern era, it became a partner in the development of 5th-generation fighter jets for South Korea, and the thought of the near-space program makes Hyun Sung's heart race. Finally, Secretary Kim says the last one is Myletus. Hyun Sung takes the file from her, thinking that this is the company he must control at any cost because if he manages to secure Myletus, then Dion and Cosmos Euro will certainly fall into his grasp as well. To the public, Myletus is just an unknown defense contractor finishing work in manufacturing shells, but in reality, Myletus is the core that controls Jaewoo Group. The chemical and ammunition production line represents an unparalleled growth engine for weapons, and this national industry is the axis of arms production encompassing Cosmos Euro and Dion. As Secretary Kim examines the files, she is surprised and tells Director Hyun to look at this. Myletus revenue is much higher than the rest. Hyun Sung tells her that this is very natural because, without raw materials, the production of weapons is impossible. Moreover, once these materials are developed, their value skyrockets. Secretary Kim tells him that this explains his insistence on Myletus, as she thought he chose it because it was the least well-known among them, making it easier for him to control the selection of directors freely. He tells her that the last comment is not quite accurate yet and asks why Myletus' budget is in this state. The secretary doesn't respond, asking him to wait a moment before answering a phone call. Hyun Sung is surprised by her behavior, thinking that, as his secretary, she should treat him with some respect. As soon as she ends her call, she becomes very excited and tells Hyun Sung that starting tomorrow, he will be sending his reports directly from Myletus as the head of the development team there. Hyun Sung laughs, saying he shouldn't laugh or rejoice as there is still a long and challenging journey ahead of him. His smile widens further because he knows things will only get more exciting from here on, and his journey of making history is about to begin. On an icy highway, Hyun gazes out of the car window, thinking that it has been a month since he took over as head of the development team and began the development project for the new armor-piercing shell. Once the development process is complete and they move to mass production, he will be able to earn Chairman Jin's trust. But this isn't enough for him. He needs to strengthen his position to the point where he can have the opportunity to develop a new weapon freely in the future. For that reason, he needs an extraordinary innovation, a state-of-the-art weapon far ahead of its time, like a smart shell for example. The driver hears Hyun Sung mumbling this and asks if Hyun called him or something, to which Hyun Sung replies that he was just talking to himself and that it's nothing. Hyun Sung returns to his thoughts about the smart shell and the possibility of creating something like that in this era, thinking it wouldn't just be for North Korea but also China and Japan, and that none of the areas within the range of their self-propelled and naval guns would be prepared for military provocations. Hyun Sung makes up his mind to achieve this no matter the cost. He asks Assistant Yang why he keeps glancing at him in the mirror like that. The driver laughs and apologizes, saying that Hyun Sung's expressions while deep in thought caught his attention. He thinks that his assistant Yang has keen insight in fact, and as he considers it more, he recalls that Yang was a highly skilled judo player, skilled enough to play for the national team. Thanks to Hyun's great kindness, the two became connected ever since Assistant Yang was seen by Hyun in the hospital hallway, feeling utterly hopeless due to his mother's exorbitant surgery costs. Though they were strangers at the time, Hyun paid Yang's mother's surgery costs in full, and their relationship began from that moment when Yang insisted on working for Hyun as his assistant. Hyun Sung asks assistant Yang if he regrets abandoning his sports career to become his assistant. Yang doesn't take long to respond, telling him that he has no regrets whatsoever and that, without Hyun's help back then, his mother would have died long ago. Hyun Sung laughs and tells him that he also caused him big trouble, and if they add it all up they're even, so neither owes the other anything and he can leave whenever he wants. Assistant Yang laughs, saying he will continue working until retirement, collecting a decent severance package, and if Hyun Sung fires him before that, it will be considered illegal and forced dismissal. Hyun Sung laughs, telling Assistant Yang that their conversation throughout the journey made it feel shorter. Finally, they arrive at the Myletus Integrated Research Center. Hyun Sung walks down the hallway of the center calmly. He sees someone standing outside on the balcony as if waiting for someone. He recognizes the person and realizes it is the professor, calling out to him that he is here now. Hyun Sung approaches him, asking if he still drinks a lot every day. This is the first time Hyun has seen the professor since he entered Hyun's body. The professor responds, saying that it's a habit he'll never give up, and ever since Hyun Sung stopped drinking with him, he's been drinking alone. Hyun Sung tells him that he should think about quitting the habit these days and should consider his health more. Hyun feels emotional, realizing the reason he feared seeing his mentor until now is that, in 10 years the professor will pass away from cirrhosis of the liver. The professor laughs and tells Hyun Sung not to worry, saying that no one dies before their time and everyone has their destined moment. Hyun Sung asks him about Jia. The professor replies that she is still the same, assisting him, and nothing has changed at all. Hyun Sung laughs, finding it hard to believe that Secretary Kim and the professor are cousins. The professor looks at him with a threatening expression, warning him to be careful. Hyun Sung laughs and says he would never dare do anything to her. The professor laughs in jest, saying that joking with his student after such a long time is truly enjoyable. Hyun Sung tells him that he notices he seems relaxed, meaning that the production of the armor-piercing shell alloy is going smoothly. The professor replies that it is going very smoothly. Thanks to all the equipment available here, they won't face any problems, and there is no other research facility in the world with such a diverse array of material processing equipment as this one. He adds that in about a month, they'll be ready to test the final production. But there is one issue ahead of them. The weight of the old and new shells is almost identical, causing a drop in muzzle pressure when firing the new shells. Hyun Sung tells him that the reason is that the new shell's shape affects the pressure inside the barrel. The professor is stunned by the logical explanation, and Hyun Sung feels victorious because he faced this problem in his previous life. The professor gets worked up, wondering how he missed such a point, saying that his student is now teaching and guiding him. After calming down, he tells Hyun Sung that he still sees him as more fit to be a researcher than a businessman and says that the offer still stands for him to join him. Hyun Sung laughs awkwardly, saying he doesn't remember the professor offering him that before. The professor replies, saying that Hyun Sung was the one who made the offer. Hyun Sung is shocked to hear his name mentioned at this time, but the professor continues, asking if Hyun Sung knows what happened to him, why he cut off contact so drastically, and if he knows anything about him. Hyun Sung, looking up at the sky, replies that he's also been looking for him for some time, but still there's no news about him. Later in the springtime, Secretary Kim cheerfully asks Hyun Sung if he would like some coffee. Hyun Sung asks what has made her so happy and if something good has happened recently. She pulls out a cartridge and tells him that he's as sharp as ever. She shows him the cartridge labeled Fire Test DRW-12, which is the 20th fire test of the new projectile, which has already been under development for a month. Hyun Sung asks her to play the video, though he isn't very curious because he's seen it in his previous life. Secretary Kim tells him they tested the projectile on a K-1 armored tank. Hyun Sung tells her that it's indeed a locally developed tank, but it's based on the American M1 tank, according to the Abrams designs. If this tank is penetrated, it means that all the existing tanks can be easily penetrated. The video starts showing the projectile being fired. Developed with extreme care, it indeed hits the tank. Secretary Kim didn't quite understand and asked Hyun Sung if this meant they had succeeded, noting that she hadn't paid much attention since the test was so quick. Hyun Sung responded victoriously that they had indeed succeeded. From now on, people would call this projectile the Reaper. Hyun stood up from his desk and told Secretary Kim that this had truly been a successful test and she should go inform the chairman of the news immediately. Secretary Kim told him that Professor Myung had already left and sent the report. Hyun Sung felt pleased, saying that this would soon make the chairman push the military towards mass production, and they would need presentation materials for the mass production meeting, so they should prepare well. Just then, Secretary Kim received a phone call, and Hyun Sung waited for her to finish. Secretary Kim then happily informed him that the chairman was summoning him personally. Hyun Sung felt nervous, thinking that the chairman must be calling him to try to expedite the meeting on mass production, and told the secretary that they probably wanted him to come and zone out a little, right? Secretary Kim walked over, adjusted his tie, and asked what he was talking about. They were asking him to go to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, not the headquarters, which meant it was just an invitation to lunch, nothing more. At the hotel, there was a suite for Korean cuisine, and the security guard welcomed Hyun-sung and Secretary Kim, telling them that they were expected and asking them to follow him to the private suite. Once they arrived, the guard told Chairman Jean that his second son had arrived. Hyun greeted the chairman but was surprised to see that his father was not alone in the suite. The executives were also present, and Hyun-sung guessed that this was more than just a lunch invitation. Chairman Jean asked him to come and sit. Hyun-sung asked if there was a problem or something. The chairman replied, "A problem? No problems. I just wanted to have lunch with you, nothing more," and told Hyun-sung that he read the report that was sent, and it exceeded all his expectations. He added that watching the test footage made him feel like rewarding the people who instilled logic and responsibility in his son, making him wonder if these people were responsible for changing his son's nature and personality. Hyun-sung felt proud and accomplished because of the look Chairman Jean was giving him, a look full of pride and admiration. The chairman told him that he had ordered financial rewards for the research team and asked Hyun-sung if there was anything he wanted, telling him not to be shy about asking. Hyun-sung looked at him with shining eyes because he did want something. The chairman encouraged him to ask for what he wanted, saying he had indeed played a very significant role this time. Not wasting the opportunity, Hyun-sung asked the chairman to pay the licensing fees for the armor-piercing iron rounds. The chairman gave him a sidelong glance, noticing that Hyun-sung never missed a chance. Hyun-sung clarified that he meant royalties specifically, as Myletus had greatly benefited from his developments, so it was only natural for the royalties to be his. Chairman Jean responded that inviting Hyun-sung to lunch should be enough and that they were even, as such matters didn't exist between family members. Hyun-sung felt annoyed and told his father that if that were the case, he wouldn't eat anymore. The chairman teased him, asking if he was serious, and Hyun-sung replied that there were many things he had been waiting to buy. Chairman Jean looked at him and said that if that was the case, then he might have to sell the new yacht he bought and hadn't used yet, jokingly adding that he couldn't let his son wish for something without fulfilling it. He laughed along with him, saying that in a world like this, boasting about owning a yacht might expose him to attacks. The chairman replied, "Look who's talking." Hyun-sung responded that his vast experience allowed him to give advice normally. The chairman laughed and told Hyun-sung that he agreed on the matter of royalties. He then put the topic aside and pulled out a large document related to mass production, telling Hyun-sung that this was the real reason he called him here. Hyun-sung took the document and found it to be a production request form, asking if they had already submitted it to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The chairman replied that developing new armor-piercing rounds was a project that had the military constantly pursuing it, and with the information they had, they tried to finalize everything quickly and submit it. Surprisingly, without any preamble, they decided to hold the mass production meeting today. Hyun-sung was astonished, shocked that they were going to carry it out in just one day like this. The chairman told him that even though he was taken aback, it showed their passion and enthusiasm for the latest technologies. They would inform them of the production quantity directly after the meeting. Moreover, after the meeting, all the details would remain confidential until the presidential briefing, and he had a friend in the Mobile 7th Corps who promised to tell him everything in advance. Hyun-sung told him that the Mobile 7th Corps would indeed benefit the most from the new projectiles and asked the chairman what his estimate was for the quantity they would request. The chairman responded that considering war reserves, they would not request fewer than 100,000 projectiles and rounds. Hyun-sung told him that this equated to around 20 billion won in sales. The chairman replied that sales weren't the key. The difference lay in profit margins, and that would mean about 4.5 billion won at the very least. Hyun-sung said that since this is specialized ammunition, the margin should be at least 30%, meaning around 6 billion won. Chairman Jean smiled, surprised at the price, and Hyun-sung told him that the added value of the manufacturing lines could be easily achieved. If he added this 6 billion to the previous delivery payments, Myletus would be able to fund the development of advanced weapons independently, without any military support. The idea of a smart projectile kept nagging at Hyun-sung's mind as he thought about it. The chairman was impressed with what Hyun-sung was saying, telling him that it seemed there were many things Hyun-sung had been keeping hidden. Hyun-sung took advantage of this opportunity and was about to tell the chairman his idea, but the sound of an executive's phone ringing interrupted him, frustrating Hyun-sung, who thought that this company's members truly had bigger problems than developing weapons. After answering the phone, the executive told the chairman that the caller was General Kim Taek from the Mobile 7th Corps. The chairman told him to answer quickly, mentioning that the meeting had already ended. Everyone remained seated, waiting to hear from the general and for the call to conclude. The executive said he was waiting to discuss the matter and asked the general about the quantity. They would request the negotiations continue for a while, and Chairman Jean remains tense but composed. After the executive ends the call, the chairman quietly asks if the news is likely to be bad. He asks about their current situation. The executive replies that the general said they would only purchase around 7,000 rounds per year. The team itself was surprised by this news. It was unexpected, but that was what happened. Hearing this, the chairman feels extremely distressed, as 7,000 rounds wouldn't even cover the development costs. The chairman stands up, deeply shaken by the bad news, and goes to take the phone, intending to speak with the general himself. Asking if the chief of staff is available, he takes the phone and leaves the room, then returns and places the phone on the desk. Hyun-sung anxiously asks the chairman what the response was, and the chairman replies that they claimed the budget was tight due to the country's economic crisis. It was all lies. Hyun-sung is puzzled and asks if the chairman suspects something, to which he replies that next year there is a major defense project that they aren't involved in. If they overspend on the armor-piercing round project now, the next year's budget will be reduced. Hyun-sung tells him that's why they cancelled their project. The chairman replies in frustration, saying that next year's project is worth over 3 trillion. Hyun-sung thinks that this is a rare opportunity for the old guard at the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 200 billion versus 2 trillion. The commissions would be tenfold if they spent this year's budget on Hyun-sung's project. Their share of next year's profits would be reduced. So, Hyun-sung asked the chairman how much they had originally planned to give them to secure this project. The chairman replies angrily that he didn't intend to give them a single penny and that he wouldn't give them anything, asking Hyun-sung in disbelief if he thought he ran his business with bribes. Hyun-sung realizes then that the lack of bribes is the reason for this situation, and Chairman Jin turns out to be a much more upright person than he thought. He is also more respectable than Hyun had imagined. The chairman stands up and tells everyone not to slack off, saying that the entire matter is purely political. He then directs his words to Hyun-sung saying, "Don't let this discourage you. This is business, it has its wins and losses." The chairman then leaves saying he will go ahead first and wishing them good luck. But Hyun calls out to him, saying they haven't incurred any losses yet. The chairman replies that producing at a rate of 7,000 rounds per year means they are producing at a loss, but they can't simply refuse, given the nature of the business and that the defense industry doesn't always focus solely on company profits. Hyun-sung asks why they don't sell to others. The chairman replies that their project is for the military, which is why they are with them. Hyun-sung argues that these are the same people who backstabbed them after asking them to produce and act, so it's only right for them to seek alternatives to the military. No one would complain or be able to object. The chairman stands, contemplating Hyun-sung's words carefully. Hyun-sung tells him enthusiastically that if he supports him in just one thing, he will take full responsibility for selling the rounds at a military institution. One of the commanders, looking out the window, says it looks like they're in for a very expensive evening. Hyun-sung and Chairman Jin arrive at the United Nations Combined Defense Forces building. Chairman Jin asks if Hyun-sung is sure the US military office will buy their armor-piercing rounds, adding that it is worth trying no matter what. Hyun-sung replies that the US has a Foreign Comparative Testing (FCT) program to buy allied weapons and that the US naturally needs their armor-piercing rounds. The chairman asks why Hyun-sung says the US needs their weapons when they haven't bought anything from them before. He walks along, feeling anxious and hoping this doesn't affect his relationship with the commander, as he has worked hard to strengthen this relationship. Hyun-sung tells his father that the reason the US hasn't purchased any Korean weapons is that they did not meet their standards, but this time the armor-piercing rounds are entirely different in terms of quality. Agrees with him, although he laments that now they are selling something to the US military that could have enhanced their defense capabilities for 20 full years, feeling deeply frustrated, adding that the chiefs of staff must be extremely desperate to waste such an opportunity. Hyun-sung laughs and tells Chairman Jin that he seems more concerned about the country than the company's profits, joking that it turns out he is a pure patriot. The chairman replies, saying that Hyun-sung is too naive and won't understand this until he grows older and reaches his age. He adds that it's not something as grand as patriotism, it's about the country where he was born and raised. The older he gets, the more such irrational feelings seem ridiculous. Hyun-sung understands Chairman Jin's words well, especially since he used to be a lone scientist without any sense of patriotism. However, due to the sudden irrational drive he felt, he sacrificed his life for the country. Hyun-sung tells the chairman not to worry because if this deal succeeds, the Joint Chiefs of Staff will demand that the order quantity be restored. The chairman asks Hyun-sung what the relationship is between exporting and the Joint Chiefs of Staff returning to restore the order, to which Hyun-sung replies that he will understand in due time. Until then, Hyun-sung asks the chairman to grant him full authority in this negotiation. He assures him that he will not only succeed in exporting rounds to the US Army but also secure new armor-piercing rounds for Korea. The chairman laughs proudly, telling him that as long as this is something he's planned, he should do as he wishes, and whatever his judgment or decision is, it will be the chairman's decision as well. In the office of General Hammer, the commander of the Combined Forces Command for the Republic of Korea and the United States, he greets Chairman Jin, saying it has been a long time since their last meeting. Chairman Jin returns the greeting, saying it indeed has been a long time, and the last time they met was during the foundation ceremony. General Hammer notices Hyun-sung and asks if this is his second son, to which the chairman responds that this is the son he mentioned in their conversation. Hyun-sung extends his hand to greet the commander, saying it's an honor to meet him, and introduces himself as Jin Hyun-sung, head of the development team at Daewoo Myletus. However, the commander doesn't shake his hand and dismisses him, saying he doesn't want any formalities and wants to get straight to work. He walks away and returns to his office, leaving Hyun-sung with his hand still extended for a moment. Hyun-sung notices from the commander's behavior that this meeting is happening reluctantly. The commander sits in his chair and asks what they have requested. Hyun-sung professionally replies that it's not a request, but an offer, or more specifically, a proposal, stating that he's offering an opportunity that shouldn't be missed. The commander glances at him, clearly intrigued by his manner of speaking. He tells him in a commanding tone that he wants to know what this unmissable opportunity is, instructing him to begin. Hyun-sung hands over a document and asks him to take a look at it first, stating that if he likes it, he will request a recommendation letter to submit to the FCT program. General Hammer is slightly taken aback, asking Hyun-sung if he wants to proceed with the U.S. Department of Defense's procurement program. He confirms that's exactly what he intends to do, explaining that the armor-piercing rounds they developed are highly effective. The commander replies sarcastically, saying Hyun-sung should have done his homework before coming here, as the US already has the best armor-piercing rounds in the world. Instead of using high-quality, reasonably priced uranium rounds, why would they buy their composite alloy rounds, which are more expensive compared to the effective and cheaper uranium rounds? He adds that if Hyun-sung came all the way here, he should have developed something decent at the very least. He goes on to say that while confidence is needed, understanding the basics of business is even more important. Hyun-sung tells him that he understands and fully agrees with the point he is making. The commander replies, "That's the spirit. Keep learning and developing," and adds that now that they're done here they can leave. However, Hyun interrupts him, suggesting that since they've taken his time, why not watch just one video before they leave? The commander, irritated, tells him that it seems Hyun-sung didn't understand his point well enough. But he doesn't pay heed to his words, insisting that he needs to see it for himself to make an informed judgment. The commander sighs and sits back down, thinking that Hyun is just a salesman trying to fool him. The commander watches the video showing an angled penetration test, demonstrating that the rounds have barely managed to penetrate at that angle. The angle and thickness of the plate make it possible for foreign rounds to penetrate, and these are settings that only US rounds can penetrate under, with a much lower penetration rate than what could be achieved in real-world scenarios. The commander thinks that, at best, Daewoo round might cause a small dent, and even that would be an incredible achievement for a Korean company. Just as the commander is about to reject the project outright, he is stunned. He is shocked by the penetration capability of Daewoo's round. He rises from his chair in disbelief at what he just saw, amazed by the impressive speed, accuracy, and penetration power of the projectile. Its tremendous destructive capability leaves him speechless. General Hammer cannot take his eyes off the screen, unable to believe that something like this even exists in the world. Hyun laughs confidently, seeing the look of shock on the commander's face. He tells him assuredly that this product has a penetration capability 20% higher than the US military's depleted uranium rounds. General Hammer is astonished by the number, realizing that a 20% increase would render every armor in the world useless, as if they were just glass plates. He confidently tells him that, as he said from the beginning, he is giving the United States a great opportunity. The general thinks for a moment. Something like what he just saw shouldn't be possible using rounds made only from tungsten, but he saw it with his own eyes, and there was no way the test was faked. He asks Hyun why he is seeking to provide the US with this product. Hyun replies that it's because the United States is the country that needs it the most right now. He explains that the US is currently facing radiation leakage issues caused by depleted uranium shells, and in such a scenario, tungsten projectiles, which outperform uranium rounds, are easier to store and use and are naturally drawing attention. He also heard that the US is making significant efforts to develop similar rounds. The general is surprised to hear Hyun's statement. He says he's now confused and asks him how he knew they were developing new armor-piercing rounds. Hyun responds diplomatically, stating that this level of information gathering is quite standard for a businessman in the defense industry. The general, agitated, says that this is nonsense and that they were very cautious even when importing raw materials to prevent any information leaks. Chairman Jean listens to the conversation quietly, pleased with Hyun's ability to handle the dialogue and his diplomatic responses. Hyun replies to the general, telling him that their efforts were in vain, as it's impossible to hide the movement of specialized metallic materials used exclusively in weapons manufacturing in the international market. The general admits that it's indeed silly and acknowledges that they tried to develop new armor-piercing rounds, but abandoned the idea due to the high production costs. Hyun responds cheerfully, telling the general that this is exactly why he said he was offering the opportunity of a lifetime and that they would supply them at the same price as the depleted uranium rounds. He begins by explaining that they succeeded in reducing the amount of expensive tungsten and replacing it with a new composite alloy and that this brilliant idea allowed them to significantly cut production costs. General Hammer listens to Hyun's words, astonished and in disbelief. He asks Hyun excitedly if what he is saying could be true, adding that it seems impossible that it could also be cheaper. Hyun replies that it's not cheap, but reasonably priced, and this is an exclusive offer for the United States only. After that, the contracts are prepared for both parties. General Hammer signs the recommendation letter, telling Hyun that this is a handwritten recommendation letter, and all he has to do is attach it to the front of the documents, and they will be delivered directly to the highest decision-making authority. Hyun is overjoyed because they succeeded in getting a recommendation from one of the top 10 figures in the US military, the commander of the United States Korea Combined Forces Command. General Hammer calls Hyun, interrupting his thoughts, telling him that now he understands why Hyun said at the beginning that he was offering an unmissable opportunity, extending his hand and expressing his gratitude. Hyun smiles, feeling emotional and accomplished as he is finally being recognized. He shakes the general's hand firmly, saying it was an honor to meet him. Chairman Jean watches the scene unfold quietly, feeling immense pride in his son, especially because he hadn't intervened in anything at all. 10 days after General Hammer's meeting in Hyun's office, as the head of the development team, he receives a call from General Michael, the former head of the U.S. Army's Weapons Acquisition Planning Division. General Michael tells Hyun that he reviewed all the documents he sent and comments that they have indeed developed excellent armor-piercing rounds. Hyun thanks him for his kind words. General Michael continues, telling Hyun that he had some questions after watching the test report. Hyun responds, "Go ahead and ask whatever you'd like to clarify," and adds that if Michael wants, he can send him several samples to test them personally on Abrams tanks. He asks if Michael likes the idea of sending samples, to which Michael enthusiastically replies that he welcomes the idea very much. He says that this way he can directly understand the product's advantages and disadvantages, and then they can handle the related procedures from their side. After another 10 days, General Michael calls Hyun again, speaking with excitement and awe. Hyun asks him what he sent to him and how he managed to create rounds with such power. Hyun laughs and tells General Michael that it seems like he's quite satisfied with the results, to which Michael responds that satisfied doesn't quite capture it. His product has made a huge splash and turned things upside down in the military. He then says that he wants to ask a sincere question. How many rounds can they produce annually? Hyun is thrilled by the question but tries to keep his composure, telling the former commander that they can produce about 100,000 rounds per year. Deep inside, Hyun knows that 100,000 rounds annually are an exaggerated offer, but exaggeration is necessary to achieve bigger goals, giving him room to adjust the offer later. Michael responds in an even more shocking manner, saying that this is far from enough, which is unfortunate. But regardless, they will proceed and sign a 5-year contract with that production amount. Hyun tries to keep his excitement in check and not get overly eager. General Michael goes on to say that a representative from the U.S. forces in Korea will visit the country tomorrow and will bring with them the necessary documents for the contract, emphasizing to Hyun that 100,000 rounds annually must be produced each year. Hyun is stunned by the terrifying size of the U.S. budget, which shatters all of his expectations. He goes personally to inform Chairman Jean of the deal, who is also shocked by the figure and by the U.S. Army's request for 500,000 rounds and their desire for more. Hyun Sung tells him that they will indeed be signing a contract to produce 100,000 rounds per year over 5 years, which equals roughly 200 billion won in annual revenue. Therefore, the total revenue over 5 years will be 1 trillion won. Chairman Jean feels triumphant about this enormous profit. He tells Hyun Sung proudly that he has done an outstanding job, and if it weren't for the stance of the Korean Chief of Staff, he would have thrown a party and invited all his acquaintances to celebrate this unprecedented achievement. Hyun Sung senses that bad news is about to be delivered, so he asks Chairman Jean why the Chief of Staff is upset now. Chairman Jean explains that they called a few days ago and pressured them to prioritize their supply because a private company has developed superior weapons, and they are worried about losing faith if the US takes the offer first. Hyun Sung is irritated and tells Chairman Jean that prioritizing delivery to the first contractor, the US Army, is only natural. Furthermore, their maximum production capacity is 100,000 rounds annually, and if they prioritize 7,000 rounds for the Korean Army, it will delay the US shipment. The chairman tells Hyun Sung that he understands all of this, and this time he won't bow to their unreasonable demands. He will deal with the Chief of Staff himself. Hyun Sung refuses, asking the chairman to let him handle them, assuring that he will make sure they don't provoke them like this again and that he will surpass them with what they deserve and more. Chairman Jean is a little concerned by Hyun Sung's words and asks him what exactly he is planning. Hyun Sung responds that there's no need to worry at all and that he has a solid plan. He explains his plan to the chairman, who is surprised by Hyun Sung's cunning and asks when he started thinking this way. Hyun Sung replies confidently that he had been thinking this way from the beginning and that every move of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was taken into account in his plan. In the Development Department's press section, Hyun Sung calls journalist Han Ji-yeon and tells her he wants to share some news. In turn, she contacts journalist Lee and tells him that she has exclusive news from Myletus, promising a certain scoop and that she's eager to see the fantastic article they'll write about them. Immediately afterward, news spreads about the armor-piercing rounds developed by Daewoo Myletus that have been exported to the US Army. It is reported that this deal is the largest arms export deal and is expected to significantly contribute to overcoming the foreign export crisis. Their sources say that the Korean military's total order for the rounds was only 7,000 units, a reduction from the originally planned quantity of 100,000 rounds, and that the Joint Chiefs of Staff remain reserved about the matter. Meanwhile, the US Army is ordering 100,000 units annually, far exceeding Myletus' production capacity. Since the US is the primary contractor, they have priority, meaning that the Korean military might not even secure the 7,000 rounds for 5 years. Furthermore, the news mentions that the performance of these armor-piercing rounds is highly impressive, and if they lose all their advantages to the US, they will be giving up more than 20 years of advanced defensive capabilities. The rest of the news sparks controversy, saying that an advanced weapon developed domestically was completely overlooked while a foreign country acquired it, and the only explanation for this is that the rumors about internal corruption among the chiefs of staff are true. Hyun watches the uproar caused by this news and laughs devilishly, knowing that everything is going as planned and smoothly. His contemplation is interrupted by Secretary Kim calling him. She nervously tells him that he has been summoned to the chairman's office immediately. Hyun calmly tells her that he knows and that he has been waiting for this moment. Hyun arrives at Daewoo's headquarters and Chairman Jin is notified of his arrival. He enters the company's office but is surprised when he sees the scene before him. The chairman tells Hyun to greet their guests first. They are the representatives of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They look at Hyun with anger as soon as he enters, clearly not able to stand him at all, making the atmosphere in the room tense. Hyun greets them and introduces himself, but one of them rises angrily and says to Hyun, "What is this mess you've caused?" Hyun feigns ignorance, asking what exactly he means. He focuses on the person a bit and notices that he carries 4 stars, recognizing him as HN Dong-hoon, the chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Person shouts at him, telling him not to pretend he doesn't understand, saying that the entire military is in turmoil because of the American export deal he made. Hyun innocently asks if this is something worthy of criticism, saying that, on the contrary, in times like these during the IMF crisis, they are bringing in a significant amount of foreign currency into the country. In such difficult times, is it expected that they limit production levels that don't even cover development costs? After all, they are a company striving for profit. The chief of staff is provoked by Hyun's words and asks if he's trying to pick a fight with him. He then sits back down and shouts that this is enough and says they are here because the president has issued a special order to restore the original order quantity. He tells Hyun that with this he should be satisfied and that there shouldn't be any issues. However, Hyun's thoughts are entirely different, and Chairman Han thinks he is doing Hyun a favor with this offer. The chairman continues speaking, instructing Hyun to prepare himself to sign the contract immediately. Hyun interrupts him, saying that he's sorry, but there are currently no supplies available for the Korean military, as they are barely able to meet the demands of the US Army. The chief of staff becomes upset but tries to keep his temper in check. He tells Hyun with difficulty as he tries to remain calm, that he might have spoken insistently and emotionally, but he asks him to reconsider their request, adding that the president himself intervened in this matter, and refusing the request will make him look bad. Hyun understands that what truly concerns Chairman Han isn't the president's image, but his position, which might be jeopardized because he missed such an opportunity at the start. He replies to Chairman Han, saying that the situation therein is challenging. Chairman Han asks him again to find any possible way. One of the officers notices that Hyun isn't easy to deal with, to the point that he even made the chief of staff himself feel nervous and unsettled. Hyun tells the chairman that the problem isn't that there aren't other ways, but that the matter will be complicated. Chairman Han is excited and asks Hyun what those possible ways are, promising to support them as much as he can. Hyun tells him that the problem now is the lack of production lines and that building a new factory isn't feasible in the short term. Therefore, the quickest solution is to convert the explosive rounds production line to armor-piercing rounds. Although converting the factory settings will require a substantial investment, and to compensate for all these costs, they will need to produce an additional 20,000 rounds annually. Chairman Han hesitates and asks how long this agreement should last. Hyun replies that it must last at least 3 years, meaning they will need to buy a total of 160,000 rounds. Hyun speaks confidently with only one thought in his mind, that just as the Joint Chiefs exploited their power to fill their pockets, he wouldn't hesitate to use the same tactic against them. Chairman Han reluctantly agrees, finding himself unable to refuse or even negotiate. He thinks that, to cover the 160,000 rounds, he will need to pull from next year's defense enhancement budget, which means all the commissions he received are now gone. The chief of staff leaves, extremely angry and frustrated, without saying goodbye to anyone, telling them to finish this matter now. Hyun-sung salutes them as they leave. One of them catches Hyun-sung's attention, telling him that he's different from what the rumors said about him. He extends his hand to shake Hyun-sung's and introduces himself as Commander Kim Taek, the head of the 7th Mobile Corps. He offers Hyun-sung to have a meal together whenever he has the time. Hyun-sung realizes that this is the person who initially contacted them. He shakes his hand and tells Commander Taek that he has heard a lot about him. The commander responds saying that he has also heard a lot about Hyun-sung, but he found him to be different from what he expected. Hyun-sung laughs and asks him what he heard. Commander Taek starts recounting the things he heard, mentioning bar and pub fights, and that Hyun-sung was a spoiled child from a wealthy family who thought everything could be solved with money. Hyun-sung says, "Okay, enough. I'm sorry I asked in the first place." But the commander continues. He then tells Hyun-sung after embarrassing him that he was just joking. But in truth he wants to ask him about something. Hyun-sung asks what that is. Commander Taek asks Hyun-sung why he went to such lengths to ensure that their army would secure the new armor-piercing rounds, especially since he already benefits from their contract with the United States. Thus there is no loss for him. Hyun-sung asks him, what makes a businessman need justification or a reason to sell more? Commander Taek looks at him skeptically and asks if that's really the reason. Hyun-sung looks at him intently, thinking deeply. Then he sighs and decides he might as well tell the truth to the commander. He says that if Taek is so insistent on knowing his true intentions, he will be candid and tell him the unvarnished truth. He explains that, in these times, it's no longer possible to protect the country with lukewarm patriotism. They need military power that can physically overwhelm the enemy. In the era of modern warfare, science and technology determine victory, and military strength means developing and stockpiling advanced weapons. If the military neglects this duty, change will force itself upon them. Commander Taek stops him, saying that such statements are highly dangerous. He adds that Hyun-sung is indeed bold but thanks him for his honesty. Commander Taek leaves, telling Hyun-sung that they should meet someday away from prying eyes and have a meal together, and that the meal will be on him. Hyun-sung responds saying no way's happening. He will insist on hosting. Commander Taek smiles and says that this is his way of thanking Hyun-sung because he showed him something very satisfying today and insists on covering it. Hyun-sung thanks him in advance, and he tells Hyun-sung to take care until they meet again. Hyun-sung sighs in relief, saying that things have finally settled and that he will start modifying the factor's production lines and submit urgent approvals right away. Chairman Jin asks Hyun-sung why he doesn't seem worried about strained relations with the military, pointing out that the man who just left angrily might be the chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff now, but he could eventually become the Minister of Defense. If that happens, Han Dong-hoon will place them under constant scrutiny. Hyun-sung replies that this person won't even finish his term as Chief of Staff. He will soon become a burned-out case. Hyun-sung knows that if history runs its course, Han Dong-hoon will flee the military in disgrace after his corruption scandals are exposed. Chairman Jin is puzzled by Hyun's words, asking how he can speak so confidently as if he knows what will happen in the future. Hyun replies that the cause and effect are evident in these cases and that betting on someone like Taek was a wise decision too. The chairman laughs, telling Hyun to keep those thoughts to himself in the future and not share them. Then he asks him to go to his office and sign the documents. He tells Hyun that these documents are the royalty agreement he wanted, and he promises that Hyun will receive 4% of the armor-piercing round sales from now on. Furthermore, at the executive group meeting tomorrow, Hyun will be promoted to policy director. Hyun is taken aback by all this recognition. The chairman continues, saying that it's only been a few months since Hyun returned to the company and urges him not to mess things up this time. Hyun responds that the chairman will never regret these decisions. The chairman says he hopes so and asks Hyun to work hard. Hyun feels grateful and thanks Chairman Jin. The chairman is also moved but tries not to show it and tells Hyun that he generally doesn't believe this gratitude. Sometime later, the U.S. military representative in the federal capital area, General Michael, visits South Korea. Both the commander and deputy commander of the U.S. Korea Combined Forces are at the airport to receive him. For a deal of this magnitude, such a situation is very logical. Reporters notice the arrival of Hyun, the head of the development team at Jaewoo, who is considered the key figure behind the deal for exporting the new armor-piercing rounds. It is rumored that he has been promoted to policy director due to his significant contributions and is currently seen as a rising star in the business world. The journalist wants to approach Hyun but feels the situation isn't very appropriate. However, she notices Hyun looking in her direction. As soon as Hyun looks towards the reporters, they become confused and tense, especially at the thought that someone as successful as him might know one of them. They try to maintain their composure. Hyun walks towards the journalist, greets her, and tells her it has been a long time and that her latest article was excellent. She feels embarrassed and tells him that she did nothing special, that she was just doing her job as a journalist, and that there's no need for thanks at all. Hyun smiles at her and tells her that in return, once this deal is concluded, he will personally ensure to contact her first, asking if her number has changed. Hyun says that now he's giving her an exclusive opportunity. Hyun replies that it's not significant enough to be called exclusive. He adds that he simply looks forward to another impressive article from her. She is thrilled by Hyun's confidence in her and her work, while the other journalists feel jealous of her. They ask her how a beginner like her could have a connection with a rising star like Hyun, demanding that she tell them everything she knows. She asks them to be quiet because the plane has arrived. The journalists feel irritated with her, saying that just because she now has a connection with the rising star of Jaewoo Company, it doesn't mean she can ignore them and treat them with disdain. The private plane from the United States lands, and General Michael arrives on Korean soil. He is greeted by the commander and deputy commander, who tells him he has brightened the country with his presence. General Michael responds that he is happy to be in Korea. He looks around and asks, "Where is he?" referring to Hyun, whom he finds standing behind the reporters. He heads towards him, greets him and says, "You must be Jin Hyun-sung, the head of Myletus development team." Hyun laughs and tells him he is surprised that he recognized him immediately and that it is an honor to finally meet him. The deputy commander approaches them and tells Hyun that this is their first meeting, introducing himself as Lee Dong-wook. The deputy commander of the US-Korea Joint Forces, John, thinks to himself that the deputy commander of the US-Korea Joint Forces has not been directly involved in defense industries, so there is no reason to worry about him, despite him being one of only 8 four-star generals in South Korea. Hyun responds to him, apologizing that their first meeting is under such circumstances, and introduces himself as Jae-in, head of the Myletus development team. The deputy commander replies that there is no need to apologize and that if their relationship were deeper than this, it would have unnecessarily raised suspicions. Hyun notices that the general's words are sharp as if implying he should not be grouped with the corrupt leadership in the military. He also notices that the aura surrounding him is entirely different from that of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Han Dong-han and that he genuinely feels the energy of a true soldier emanating from him. The deputy commander tells him to take his car to the contract site. Hyun is surprised by the general's words, and the general clarifies that the reporters at the main gate would make it difficult to leave in any other way. He speaks with one of the commanders to take care of General Michael. The military personnel attempt to clear the reporters and the deputy commander tells Hyun that if he doesn't mind, they can schedule a separate meeting. Hyun is surprised and asks the general if there is something he wants to discuss with him privately. The general replies that it is not a personal matter. Instead, it concerns the statement he made about enforcing change in the military, with which he fully agrees. Hyun recalls his conversation with 7th Corps Commander Taik about the necessity of acquiring overwhelming military power, and if the army neglected such a matter, he would impose the change himself. Hyun understands that the deputy commander is similar to Kim Taik and tells him he will make sure they meet. General Michael asks Hyun to increase the quantity to 700,000 rounds, inquiring if such a request is possible. Hyun is surprised by the number and asks General Michael about the reason for increasing the order to such an extent. The general responds saying that 500,000 rounds were not sufficient at all, as he mentioned previously in their call, because the quantity consumed annually in training alone is very large. In addition, they need to secure stockpiles due to policy requirements, along with internal political issues that he cannot disclose. Hyun understands that the general's statement is highly accurate, considering the stockpiles required for the US forces deployed worldwide. Indeed, 500,000 rounds would not be enough, so Hyun responds by saying that there is a way to meet the request, but it will require the US military to make some sacrifices. The general replies saying he is glad there is a way and they should think about it positively. Jean tells him that to guarantee these quantities for the US military, the solution is to reuse high-explosive projectiles, but this requires the army to cover the costs of reusing the production line. The general remains silent for a while, slightly irritated by the statement, but Hyun realizes that the request is heavy. However, it is the only viable option. The general takes his time to think and eventually tells Hyun that he agrees to this proposal, asking him to proceed with the production of the 700,000 rounds. Jae-in professionally responds, saying there is no need to worry, and that they will start renewing the lines as soon as the contract is signed. The general tells Hyun that if the delivery deadline is missed, a 5% penalty fee will be applied, and he asks Hyun if he agrees to this condition. He responds that he agrees, and in addition, since the contract is for the same production line, payment must be made in advance. He asks General Michael if he agrees to that. The general responds that they agree of course, and that the US Department of Defense has already submitted an emergency funding request to Congress, but there is just one condition. Hyun asks him about this condition, fully understanding that, as expected, there is no way to approve a 14 trillion advance payment without conditions. General Michael tells him that, within 5 years starting from additional orders, production under license will be allowed in the United States. In other words, Jaewoo will export only parts, while US defense companies will handle the assembly process. Hyun asks him the reason for this condition, to which the general responds that it is to suppress the growing backlash from US companies. Hyun realizes this makes a lot of sense and that, certainly, the American companies that monopolize uranium ammunition would protest, and they would surely want to preserve their facilities by taking charge of the assembly process. By that time, the cost per unit would have risen due to the additional production anyway, and exporting parts would be better than bearing the costs of maintaining production lines. Hyun tells the general that he agrees to their condition, and the general thanks Hyun for understanding the situation. Hyun calculates that the total sales would be 1.4 trillion won, with operating profits of 420 billion won, and his share would be 4% of the sales, amounting to about 56 billion won. The general tells Hyun happily that this is a good deal and that this will not be the last time they deal with each other. Hyun tells him that he sees it the same way and intends for this to not be the last time they deal with each other, as he still has a lot to sell them. Hyun gets promoted to policy director at Myletus. This was luck that played greatly in his favor, allowing him to win the grand prize with the armor-piercing rounds deal, and he was able to reach a position where he could freely shape Myletus's policies. Now, he has the minimum foundation needed to develop smart munitions, but the problem is how to present his future technologies to the world in a rational manner, especially since the things he will invent from now on cannot be announced merely by saying, "I developed them." These are advanced technologies that can only be achieved through advanced facilities and countless experiments, so his next step must be to establish a research institute. Secretary Kim enters and calls out to Hyun. She informs him that the chief executive, his brother, left him a message saying there is a family gathering at the main house and he must attend. Hyun tells her that he does not want to attend this gathering, but Secretary Kim informs him that the president himself insists on his presence. Hyun goes reluctantly, feeling immense pressure. Even before entering, he thinks that they are trying to promote family harmony, especially since he is an illegitimate child, and with an older brother like his, a domineering one, any kind of stepmother would be like Madam Kim. When he meets her at the last moment, Hyun decides to turn around and leave, but his stepmother suddenly opens the door, visibly emotional, and asks if Hyun has arrived. Hyun is startled by the sudden door opening, and his stepmother asks him why he is acting this way. She grabs him by the arm and tells him to come and eat first, mentioning that he has already lost a lot of weight and that no matter how busy he is, he should take care of his health and eat. She adds that she heard the news and that it seems he has achieved a great accomplishment. Hyun is surprised by his stepmother's warm welcome. He had expected her to be a stern old woman, but she was gentle and kind, contrary to what he anticipated. He feels another surge of memories. His memories are of his childhood with his stepmother and the mistreatment he received from his mother. When his mother abandoned him, it was his stepmother who embraced him. John now understands that, unlike his biological mother who treated him as a burden, Mrs. Kim Hae-won treated him like her own son from the moment she met him. Reflecting on the situation, he feels that she has gone through many difficult situations. The greatest example of these hardships is that she accepted a child from her husband's illegitimate relationship and acknowledged him. They reach the dining table and Madam Kim informs President Jin that Hyun has arrived. The president asks him to sit. Madam Kim serves him his favorite dish, smoked sea bream. As she fills his plate, she asks him why he isn't eating and if he's lost his appetite. Hyun tries to explain to her that she has given him enough fish, but she keeps serving more. President Jin tells her, "Don't overdo it. The one in front of you is an adult man, not a child." Madam Kim responds that she only wants him to eat well, especially since he doesn't come to them often. Hyun's older brother finally speaks, congratulating him on securing such a big deal. Hyun thanked him for his kind congratulations. His brother continues, saying that he received a call from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff this morning. The president stops his conversation with his wife and listens to his son's words. Madam Kim does not want work-related discussions brought to the table, but Jin asks his brother what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said. His brother responds, saying that the chairman was complaining about feeling humiliated and that the environment around the chiefs is rife with talk of their dismissal. He adds that Hong Dong-hoon is considered the strongest candidate for the position of the next Minister of Defense and that it was not necessary to provoke him in this way. He understands that the situation wasn't ideal, but Hyun should have placated him a bit, because now, due to him, they are in complete conflict with the military leadership.